Hey guys, Phil Endris here with John Carroll, and you've tuned into another episode of Forward Talk. We're so glad that you joined us. Today we're talking about a subject that is certainly near and dear to our hearts. The topic that we're going to talk about is what we call the lunacy of labels. So, man, what are we going to talk about today as far as that's concerned?
Talking about the idea that labels are ineffective at defining one another. Not only are they ineffective, but many times they are dangerous at how they cause us to perceive our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so we're going to be talking today about avoiding those kinds of labels when it comes to how we want other people to be perceived.
So it's the natural, I think, just a natural tendency of humanity to sort of simplify things that are very complicated. And humanity is very complicated in all regards. The multi-layer, the multi-complexity of our actions, our emotions, our intentions, our thoughts. There's so many different layers to humanity. And so humanity tries to box that up.
Exactly.
And explain it with certain keywords. So labels like conservative, liberal.
Apostolic.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on.
It just keeps going. And it's not that we're saying that labels are inherently evil. We're not saying that, but labels can be labels can misrepresent a person, an individual, an organization, a body, and it can lead to generalizations, which can lead to bias and prejudice.
And most of the time, we put a label on something so that we can dismiss it, rather than so we can highlight the points that particular position makes. And so, if I can label something as something that is bad, if I can label something racist, or if I can label something some other really difficult label, then I can dismiss you if you're a certain label that we don't like. So I don't have to engage the conversation with you, and I don't have to answer the argumentation or the points that you're making from your view if I can put a label on you that makes everyone scared.
Right, absolutely. So this is not just talking about religious constructs or religious ideologies. This is talking about everyday life.
Yeah, as I write in my book, Are You a Christian? Mm-hmm. I make the illustration with the label conservative. And so conservative is not a monolith even within American politics. So for someone to self-label as conservative doesn't really tell you who they are. And I use the example of Tammy Bruce, who is a Fox News analyst, self-labels as a conservative. Mm-hmm. You go to her website, at least back when I wrote the book, her picture on the front page of her website, she's holding up a handgun, proud pro-gun, pro-conservative Republican, voted for, defended George W. Bush as a president, but she's pro-life and she is a lesbian. And so, but she self-identifies as a political conservative. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously, that doesn't define the conservative political movement in America, at least not the whole movement. Mm-hmm. And so to place the label of conservative on her doesn't tell you who she is. Mm-hmm. Or to read her version of conservative and then hear someone else self-label as a conservative doesn't tell you who they are. Because they're most of the time going to differ very strongly. A political conservative is going to differ very strongly with her, especially on the abortion and the pro-life issue.
Correct. Yeah, I think it's important to take things more issue by issue, and labels have a tendency to misrepresent, as we've said already, a person's ideology or a group's ideology. So apostolic is a word that you use.
Yeah, apostolic doesn't tell you very much about a person.
And not at this point, certainly not in 2018. We're here at my church right now doing a little bit of recording.
The first couple episodes we recorded at the church that I pastor.
Yeah.
So we switched locations.
Yeah, you made the drive this time. So I pastor in an apostolic hotbed. This goes back to the days of Andrew Urshan baptizing people in Chicago. And from Chicago, they moved sort of into Gary, Indiana, and Northwest Indiana, into Indianapolis, so on and so forth. So we have a lot of apostolic churches in Northwest Indiana. I wouldn't be surprised if there was 50 apostolic churches right here within 20, 30 minutes of me. Now, that's different brands and different types.
So once you get past the oneness of God, baptism in Jesus' name,
Correct.
the term apostolic is going to encompass a massive range
amount.
and spectrum of positions and views. So everything from PAW to UPC to ALJC to the broad range of the spectrum of apostolic.
Or even here's a broader one. How about Pentecostal?
Exactly.
You know, Pentecostal, I mean, you really don't know what you're getting. If you go into Chicago, there's a man by the name of Father Flager that somehow identifies as a Pentecostal Catholic.
Exactly.
And so yeah, he'd say, I'm Pentecostal,
yeah.
but he's also Catholic.
So it's certainly not what we mean when we say Pentecostal.
Right.
And so, you know, I make the point in my writings that the term apostolic means pertaining to the teachings or the practices of the apostles.
Correct.
And so to be apostolic is to live out what the apostles taught and what the apostles practiced. And so many times the term apostolic becomes like a sheet of Avery labels that we peel off and stick on any issue that we want to make a test of fellowship. And so if I don't like something you're doing, I say that's not apostolic. Or if I want to make some particular pet issue of mine a test of fellowship, then I put the label apostolic on it so that anybody that disagrees with that is outside of the brand.
Well, I think too, labels will rob you of relationships with people. Because
Absolutely.
You mentioned the word dismiss. And so labels have the tendency to dismiss an individual, not only their ideologies, but the individual as a whole.
Yeah.
So you never have a relationship with an individual because the individual has been labeled by yourself as lazy or charismatic or conservative or liberal and the list goes on.
You always have to label somebody before you can assassinate them.
Yes, that's true. That's such a good...
You always have to label them before you assassinate them.
Yeah. And then the label sort of gives you the right.
Exactly.
To do
because,
so.
My God, who in the world would want that label around?
So, I mean, there's a lot of people that are not preachers that may not understand maybe the dynamic in which we're going here right now.
Yeah.
But what is the practicability of everyday life and dealing with labels in everyday life? What is the practical application of an individual?
Well, the problem is so often when we label people, it forces them to identify as their label. So their whole identity gets wrapped up in what someone says that they are, or what they've been told that they are, and that completely misses their creative identity as a unique individual created in the image of God. And so when I place a label on you that you said earlier, lazy, or you are fat, or you are whatever, that person sees their whole identity wrapped up in their label.
Yes. Yeah, and not only that, but children.
Yes.
And so I think one of the practical avenues that we can apply this misuse of labels is to our children. Yeah, children are, especially in the formative years, they're searching for who they are. Am I going to be, what do I like to do? Do I want to be a fireman? Do I want to be this? Do I want to be that? They're searching for what they enjoy and what they like. And parents are many times enjoying their search. So what do you want to be this year? Well, this year I want to be a police officer. And next year I want to be a preacher. And this year I want to be... And so it's cute. However, when we begin to label our children certain things, dumb, stupid, those are really negative labels.
Yeah.
They begin to believe the label that you've given them.
That's right.
Well, you're lazy, you're this, and you're that. And pretty soon, they begin to act like the label that you've defined them by.
Yes.
And that doesn't stop, I think, in adulthood.
It doesn't.
I think it moves even into adulthood. So you and I were friends, but if our friendship, which it's going to continue, but if I was to begin to call you certain things, I can either lower your self-esteem or I can bring you up.
Yes, sir.
With a redemptive lift of you're a child of God, you're a man of God. That was a word that you preached from God tonight.
Yeah.
And so what does the Bible say? What does the Bible define us as? Well,
who does God say I am?
Who does God say that I am?
And I think one of the cool biblical illustrations of this is, I believe it's Mark 5, the story of Legion. When the man
Right.
comes running to Jesus,
Yes.
he says, I am Legion.
I am Legion.
He identified as his demons.
As his,
He identified as the things that plagued him. He isn't Legion.
No.
He's a human created in the image of God. Legion is the number of the demons who plagued his mind and spirit, but he come to identify as what everybody in his life had told him that he was.
Yes.
And so the problem with labels is you start to identify as your issues. You start to identify as the things in your life that you
Right.
view as negatives.
That's so true. So labels are harmful in relationships. They're harmful in relationships with husbands and wives. They're harmful in relationships many
Within the
times
ministry,
within the ministry. You know, we've got labeled a couple different things.
Yeah.
You and I on our eschatological ideology. A big word, a big nasty word, especially in the apostolic movement, is the word preterism.
Yeah.
Or preterist.
Yeah.
And because we believed differently in a couple different things,
Yeah.
we were labeled as such.
And both of us insist emphatically that there is a future bodily, physical, visible second coming of Jesus and resurrection of the dead. We do not believe that
Right.
is in the past
So
in any way.
that would disqualify us from being their definition of
A preterist.
And so but what it does is it dismisses our argument.
So
it says, just push them aside.
You don't have to listen to what they have to say. They're preterists.
Right.
And so what it also does is it completely misunderstands the term. They throw the term out and make it a dirty word without really even understanding what the term even means. Preterist simply means past. Yes. So at some point in biblical prophecy, there's nobody that technically in the definition of the word that isn't a preterist. So for example, when I get to Isaiah 9:6, for unto us a child is born, a son is given, the government should be upon his shoulders.
Yes.
I'm a preterist in Isaiah 9:6. I believe that verse has been fulfilled in the past.
They're going to take that small clip of you saying that you're a preterist
in Isaiah 9:6, where I believe that prophecy was fulfilled
Yes.
in the past. But with the second coming of Jesus, I am not a preterist. That is happening in our future.
Yes.
At some point, whenever Jesus decides He wants to come back, He's going to come back, and it's going to be future, it's going to be visible, it's going to be literal.
It's our hope.
Absolutely.
It's our future hope. So the point is, we are not a preterist,
No.
but we were labeled as such.
Absolutely.
In so much that one individual even said, it's a known truth.
It's exactly.
It's a fact.
It's a known fact that Phil and John are preterists.
Preterist, which I would push back from that. I would distance myself so far from that term. It is not a good term. It's not an accurate term.
To describe what our eschatology is.
Yeah. And so you don't want to dismiss individuals. You don't want to label them without talking to them and digging deep, using time and effort to get to know their ideas, know their beliefs. And,
I want to understand, for me, because I've been labeled so much in my life, mm-hmm. that when I hear somebody say so-and-so is this particular thing, it makes me want to reach out to that person and say, so this is what I heard. So what do you mean by this? What is it that you actually believe?
Yes.
And so I want to know the details of what that person actually believes from their mouth.
Yes.
And the problem with the conversation is that even when you use certain appropriate terms, that someone is going to hear it through their definition.
Yeah.
And then they're going to impose their definition on what you said.
Right.
And so what I want to know is not just the terms that you're using, I want to know the definitions that you're using, because not only the term but the definition is incredibly important in the conversation.
Absolutely.
So I want to let you define for you what you mean by what you say.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is with labels, you being the definer of labels or the labeler. My goodness, I've been wrong many times about people.
Exactly.
I really have. Have you ever met a person, initially, and you're like, I don't like this person.
Yeah. The first time I heard one of our mutual friends preach, I was like, I do not like this guy whatsoever.
My Lord have mercy.
But recently, it didn't take but a time or two after that he spoke an incredibly powerful word. And it's like, oh my God, I totally misjudged him the first time I heard him preach.
Yeah. You know, our relationship, I hadn't met you.
What was it, like 2 minutes into our conversation, I said something really awkward?
Yes, you did. But I had seen you before.
Yeah.
Right. So I had seen you before, and my perception of you was much different than what it was in real life.
Yeah.
My perception of you was this serious. I looked at your picture that was maybe on flyers for conferences. I'm like, this guy is really serious. And then I get around, I'm like, okay, this guy's smart, he's brilliant, but he can be a crack up, he can be a hoot, and he's not all the time serious. So
absolutely
my
not.
perception of you from afar was off, and we're all guilty of it. Everyone
Absolutely
is guilty. And not only are we guilty, we've been wrong in our perceptions and labels of individuals.
And sometimes even when our perception is accurate about someone, getting to know why that is true about them changes our tolerance level of whatever that thing may be.
Another mutual friend of ours, he says, everybody makes sense.
When you know their story.
When you know their story. Everybody makes sense.
Yep.
And so it could be that God has placed you in an individual's life. Maybe there is some glaring deficiencies in their life, but maybe God has sent you there to help that individual. But labeling them, dismissing them,
that's right,
will rob you from enacting what God has called you to do in that individual's life.
We never fix anybody by labeling them and isolating from them. The only way to engage in a relationship that's productive is to actually develop a relationship and a conversation with that person.
Exactly. And that's what we're hoping to do here. We want to develop a conversation.
That's like the whole point of Forward Talk is having this conversation, having it publicly, having it, like you said the other day, maybe I don't know if it got recorded or if that was one of the ones that we lost, but being on the record, on the record is important. Yeah,
it's important. Yeah. And so we're so thankful that you're here today. We're thankful that you've tuned in. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe right now. That's all for us this time. I'm Phil, he's John.
We'll see you next time on Forward Talk.